number 10 is Maple Hill Cemetery. Founded in 1822, this cemetery is the oldest and largest burial ground in the state, where roughly 80,000 people have been laid to rest. But with that many souls in one place, it only takes a matter of time before people start noticing something strange happening. While during the day, you may be spared from witnessing a horrifying spirit, it's said at night the tortured souls are unearthed, roaming the grounds in search of answers. Most unsettling is the park on the property, also known as the Dead Playground. Oh gee, that sounds inviting, don't you think? Apparently it's nicknamed that as many young people are buried in the area, and visitors brave enough to see for themselves what goes on claim that at night the trapped souls of the young can be seen playing around the park, while their creepy giggles echo throughout the grounds. But whatever you do, make sure you pay respect to Mary Bibb. If you knock on her mausoleum walls, she will reply with a gentle creak of her rocking chair buried inside. But if you forget to greet her, well, she just might haunt you forever. Coming in at number 9 is Fort Morgan. Said to be one of the most haunted places in all of Alabama, Fort Morgan is rife with ghoulish tales of ghosts and strange occurrences. The most notorious is that of a prisoner who's said to have died here in the early 1900s after he took his own life in the barracks. People say that if you walk past, you can still hear him crying out late at night. But he's not the only one you should fear. There's also a female spirit that wanders the grounds in search of justice after she too lost her life after being dragged into the fort and beaten to death by mysterious attackers who were never caught for the crime. Many believe she is an angry spirit with a vengeance who will torture any man who steps foot on the property. So if I were you, I'd skip this one. Next up at number 8 is Drish House. Once the home of Dr. John R. Marsh, a gambler and a drunk who built the estate in 1835 for his beloved bride Sarah. The couple lived in the home for 32 years until one day John had too much to drink for the last time and drunkenly tumbled over the stairway, falling to his demise. But you might be surprised that it's not his spirit that's trapped here, actually his wife Sarah. While no one knows for sure what keeps her soul trapped on the property, some say she was so traumatized after finding her husband dead in their home and wasn't able to recover. Others believe, however, that she refuses to leave because her family failed to honor her own funeral wishes, and so she remains, causing trouble to anyone who steps foot on the property to this day. While today the manor is used for many celebrations, Sarah remains, tormenting guests of the events, trying to get them to leave. If you're brave enough to visit, try looking up at the third-story tower. It says you can catch a glimpse of her up there. Just be careful she doesn't see you looking, or she may just follow you around the property, terrorizing you until you leave. Next up at number 7, the Old Bryce Hospital. There are few places in this world more haunted than an old abandoned mental health facility, and there is no denying that the torment that went on here is a huge reason as to why so many spirits remain haunting its grounds, seeking revenge. Built during the segregation era of America, the building was branded as an insane asylum for those suffering from mental illnesses, when in reality it was pretty much a work camp for able-bodied black people who were admitted under false pretenses and then forced into slave labor, working in the fields around the hospital. Shockingly, the facility remained open until 1977 and only closed due to new desegregation laws. It comes as no surprise that after years of abuse and inhumane living conditions suffered by the so-called patients, that people claim to have had strange experiences while visiting. Those who've dared to visit the abandoned hospital claim the souls are angry, and that as soon as you walk in, you can feel the air shift. Many report hearing strange noises, and some even claim to have seen shadowy figures lurking around every corner. Next up at number 6 is St. James Hotel. For whatever reason, hotels tend to be a pretty big hotspot for paranormal encounters, and the St. James Hotel is definitely a part of that phenomenon. Back in the day it was the first hotel operated by a black congressman, and despite having many years of success, it hit hard times in the late 1800s and was eventually forced to close its doors to the public. Fast forward about 100 years to 1997 and the hotel reopened, but this time something was off about the building. Something just wasn't right. During its century-long time as an abandoned building, it became a horrifying hub for lost souls, and I guess they decided to remain, haunting all those that dare stay the night. Visitors claim seeing full-bodied apparitions sitting at the bar, or witness lights shutting off out of nowhere. But most creepy of all was a recorded visit when a psychic research team was brought in, and they walked the grounds asking if anyone was there, but they never heard a response back. But later on, when they played the tapes, an older man's voice responded saying, "Well, that's a stupid question," making everyone in the room jump. So, what do you say? Are you brave enough to pay the ghosts a visit? Coming in at number 5, Kahaba Ghost Town. It likely comes as no surprise that a ghost town is also home to thousands of unsettling spirits. But few are more terrifying than Kahaba. Once the capital city of Alabama, it was abandoned after the Civil War when terrible flooding led to most of the buildings falling into complete disrepair, and so the citizens who survived were forced to leave for good. Today, nothing remains but the ruins of what used to be, including a church, a few cemeteries, and the Barker Mansion and its slave quarters. And I mean, that is just all the ingredients for a haunted ghost town if I've ever heard of one. Those that have tried to visit the once booming city recount that as soon as you enter the town's borders, cell service gets spotty and unreliable, only to be completely fine as soon as you step even 1 foot off the border of the town. While that alone might not scare visitors away, there are also countless reports of visitors witnessing terrifying apparitions and hearing the voices of the dead crying out at night for revenge. So visit at your own risk, but don't say I didn't warn you. Coming in at number 4 is the Boyington Oak. Of all the things that are usually haunted, like cemeteries, hospitals, churches, the last thing you'd likely expect to need to be afraid of was a tree. But trust me, this is no ordinary tree. The Boyington Oak is said to have grown from the grave of one Mr. Charles Boyington. As the legend goes, back in 1835, Charles was accused of friend Nathaniel Frost. Charles disputed the accusation and never once wavered from his alleged innocence. Still, he was found guilty for the crime and sentenced to execution as payback. But right before he was executed, he declared in front of everyone that a tree would spring forth from his grave as a proof of his innocence, and then they would all see that they had caught the wrong man. And shockingly, this is exactly what happened. Many claim that Charles's spirit haunts the tree above his grave, often freaking out those who come to visit. Even spookier is that some claim to have even seen him sitting under the tree waiting. But just who is he waiting for? No one knows exactly. Coming in at number 3 is Sloth Furnaces. Once built as a means to access iron ore, coal, and limestone, the Sloth Furnaces were far from a safe place to work. It's believed over the years at least 47 men lost their lives working at the furnaces due to the incredibly dangerous work conditions. But the most talked about is that of James Slag Wormwood, a former foreman of the furnaces known for being cruel to his employees and who died after slipping and falling into a pool of molten iron ore. Although there is rumor he may have been pushed by his workers, forced to the brink after his unending abuse. Still, after Wormwood's death, strange things started happening more and more frequently. Workers were seeing strange things, hearing strange noises, and started to feel like they were going crazy. Employees were being found injured or seen tripping and falling out of nowhere. Each of them recounted that an angry man covered in burns had tried to push them after screaming at them to get back to work. Then in 1971, a watchman encountered what he described as a half-man, half-demon who tried to push him up the stairs. After the watchman refused the spirit's advance, he was badly beaten by the entity until he fell unconscious. Later, while being examined, he was found to be covered in severe burns where he says he was beaten. So unless you're looking to be beaten up by an angry spirit and covered in burns from the blows, I might suggest a different place for your visit. Coming in at number 2 is Bear Creek Swamp. Even at the best of times, swamps give off spooky and creepy vibes, and this one might just be the worst of them all. Legend has it that many years ago, a woman's son went missing. Scared, the mother went looking for him in the nearby swamp, hoping that he had simply run away from home. But no matter how long she looked, she could never find him. It said she died in the swamp looking for him, and if you walk into the swamp today and and say, "We have your baby," 3 times, she will come out of nowhere and attack you until you leave for good. And don't even try to come back after she's banished you. You might not be so lucky the second time around. And last up today in our number 1 spot is Sweetwater Mansion. Designed by war vet General John Brahan, this mansion was named after the nearby creek and first occupied by the general's son-in-law, Robert Patton. Under Patton's jurisdiction, the basement of the mansion served as a Civil War hospital and a county jail. And if that wasn't enough, it's said that at one point someone who lived in the mansion practiced dark magic, which thinned the veil between worlds. This would make sense considering just how many people have witnessed earth-shattering apparitions that sent them running for the hills. Most notably is the casket that contains a body of a Confederate soldier in one of the downstairs rooms that will suddenly disappear right in front of your eyes. It's believed that the casket is haunted by the spirit of original owner Robert Patton, whose funeral was held at the home and who was documented having an open casket ceremony. But that's not even the scariest part. There's a room on the property that routinely locks female visitors inside. In fact, it happens so frequently that caretakers of the property have avoided entering it at all costs. And if a self-locking door and a terrifying soldier ghost don't turn you off of the property, there is also a secret room on the property with no door. The only way to enter is by a small window, and it's believed that anyone who goes in will never escape. So if I were you, I'd skip this one.
Coming into number 10, we have Old Green Eyes. I've heard of headless ghosts, but a floating set of eyes? That's pretty new to me. So Tennessee was an area of tension during the Civil War, and one particularly bloody battle in the state was fought at, I'm gonna try and pronounce it, Chickamauga. Did I get that right? Let me know, Tennessee. The battlefield is now a national park. However, if you are wandering around and think you spot a pair of green eyes peeping at you, turns out you might not be crazy. It seems that the voyeur is a Confederate soldier who met his end in the field. His body was never found, just his head, and now all that remains are his glowing green eyes. Now they're constantly watching over the field and looking out for his body. Coming in at number 9, we have Skinned Tom. Sounds like a person I don't want to meet. Tom. Tom learned how savage love can be, and he learned it the hard way. He learned it as his skin was being peeled off his body. Hip hip hurrah. Now let me explain. Back in the 1920s, a young man named Tom felt the first pricklings of love. He asked out a woman he had eyes for on a date, and she said yes. They took a trip to the aptly named Lover's Lane in East Tennessee, where the pair kissed, and more. Unbeknownst to poor Tom, his sweetheart was actually married. Her husband suspected his wife was cheating on him and tracked the pair down. When he found them lip-locked, he killed his wife in a fit of rage. He then dragged Tom from his car and skinned him alive right there on the road. Now legend has it that Tom can still be found on Lover's Lane, only as a bloodied and raw ghost carrying a knife. He's said to appear to lovers who are cheating on their significant others when they park up to smooch. Coming in at number 8, we have the White Screamer. In White Bluffs, Tennessee, you could come across something scary in the woods. It seems that urban legend has it that once upon a time a local couple had a child, only the child was hideously deformed. They locked what they saw as the abomination in the basement, feeding it daily but showing it no love. It grew. It grew some more. It grew and it grew until it was child no more and got so big and strong that it could escape into the woods. But before escaping, it killed its parents. Living feral and naked, the creature survived on pets and livestock. Indeed, locals have reported seeing a big white creature roaming the woods. Those who haven't seen it have often heard it. It seems that the creature screams a terrible high-pitched wail into the night. Coming in at number 7, we have the Witch of Concord Cemetery. Concord Cemetery is one of the oldest cemeteries in Coffee County and is well known to be haunted by a number of ghosts. Now the most famous is said to be Sadie Baker. Sadie was thought to have been burned at the stake by her community in the early 19th century for fear of being a witch. Honestly, how horrible. Now, in order to keep ill wishes from the ghost away, locals are said to leave coins by her grave as an apology. If you don't make a money offering, it's said that she will haunt you in the graveyard. If you're feeling light of coin, maybe just don't go into a cemetery at night. Suggestion. Coming in at number 6, we have the Hell Tunnel. In Kingsport, Tennessee, you can find the Sensbow Tunnel, built by the Sensbow family and the government in order to allow traffic to pass. Legend has it that the tunnel was the scene of a grisly murder, the murder of none other than the daughter of the Sensbow family. It seems a robbery had gone very wrong and the intruder had stolen away a baby so that he was not shot at. He then dumped the baby in the tunnel and sadly it died. Now in the 1950s and 60s, rumours of the hauntings were strong. There were even rumours that more people had been murdered there. Locals who lived near the tunnel warn people to stay away as the site has regularly been used for satanic rituals. Those who have been brave enough to venture through have said that they've heard a baby's cry and the shrieks of a woman. Coming into number 5, we have the Body Farm. Rumours have been circulating about a macabre scientific experiment in Knoxville, Tennessee. Locals wondered what a strip of private land was being used for, with hearsay declaring it a body farm. Well, actually, apparently it's true. Owned by the University of Tennessee, it seems that the body farm is a place where dead bodies are studied in various environments to see how they decompose. Some are simply left on the ground to rot, some are submerged in water, some are left in hot rooms. It goes to help future forensic scientists understand crime scenes better, and I guess that's a good thing, but honestly, how ghoulish. Coming in at number 4, we have the Headless Signal Man. Chapel Hill is home to a very strange mystery indeed. It seems that the area, especially around the railroad track, is home to some weird unexplained lights. Legend has it that one night a man was walking home along the track, holding a lantern to light his way. For some reason, he never heard the whistle and scream of the train as it came up behind him. Now the train driver tried to stop, but it was too late. The man was mown down. The lamp he was holding was reportedly never found, but can be seen today as he watches each train go by. Other versions of the stories say that a headless signalman wanders up and down the track at night. Whatever the story, the lights are topic of frequent discussion amongst locals. Coming into number 3, we have the cursed bride of Ronde Mansion. Rowena Ross's life was inexplicably plagued with tragedy. Despite being the daughter of a successful plantation owner and living in a mansion in Kingsport, she seemed to attract terrible luck. Like a lot of young girls, she fell in love, and actually she was lucky enough to be loved back. Sadly though, on the day of her wedding, her husband died in a freak boating accident. She married again and he too died, this one of yellow fever. Fearful that she was cursed, she did marry a third time, but she was worried. Now this time, her husband didn't die, but her only daughter did. Absolutely destroyed by grief and a strange sense of guilt, Rowena took her own life. People claim that she still haunts the mansion today and can be spotted wearing white, walking the halls sobbing. Finally, coming into number 1, we have the legend of the Bell Witch. This is Tennessee's most famous urban legend and one of the most well-known ghost stories in the state. The legend of the Bell Witch goes as follows. In 1817, a cruel presence began haunting John Bell and his family at their home in Robertson's County. They had lived on the property for 13 peaceful years, but it all changed. They began seeing strange animals, hearing knocking sounds, hearing chains being dragged, and hearing weird guttural gurglings. This all went on for a year, and John Bell finally confided in his neighbours. A committee was formed to investigate what TF was actually happening. It seems that the witch began communicating with the crowds that formed to see what was going on. Their energy seemed to feed her and spur her on. Indeed, many say they spoke to the witch. It seems she knew details of the past and future, and she told those who asked that her goal was to kill John Bell and to make sure that his daughter did not marry a neighbour. John Bell died after a long illness in 1920, and eventually his daughter's marriage was called off. In 1821, declaring her work done for now, the witch said that she would leave for 7 years and then return, which she did. She came back to talk with Bell's son, saying that there was a reason his dad had to die, but she never disclosed her motives. She then fled again, saying she'd be back in 107 years, which would have been in 1935. Now, it is undocumented whether or not she did come back, but people still talk about the legend today.
Moving on to number 9 now, we have the Skunk Cape. A number of southern states in the US have the legend of the skunk ape, but I think it's most prominent in Florida. Ever since the 1960s and 70s, Floridians have been reporting the sight of a giant ape-like creature stalking the Everglades. More often than not, they don't just see this creature, they also smell it. It gets the skunk part of its name from its unbearable odor, said to be like methane or rotten eggs. Physical descriptions vary, but the Skunk Cape is said to stand about 7 feet tall and weigh up to 450 pounds. Locals say it lives in alligator caves along with dead animal carcasses. While most scientists have discredited the idea of a giant ape running around Florida, there are many people who swear by it. These days there's even an official skunk ape research headquarters in Ochapee. Researchers collect samples and investigate reports of swamp ape sightings. At the time of recording, they've yet to find conclusive evidence, and the search continues. At number 8 now, we have the Killer Cloud. Honestly, out of all the urban legends that I've talked about on this channel, this is perhaps one of the most unique. In the woods along the Tomoka River on Daytona Beach, a strange pink cloud has been blamed for the disappearance of dozens of people over the years. The cloud was first seen in the 1950s and 60s and is said to appear during the colder months of the year. It's rumoured to devour the flesh off human bodies. Locals have reported finding human bones in the area after the cloud has disappeared. Some say that it's swamp gas or a local fog that covers only a small area. Perhaps the creepiest explanation though is that it's the angry spirit of Chief Tomoki, who was cursed for drinking from a sacred spring. Now he devours anyone who can't outrun the pink cloud. Next at number 7 now, we have the Tallahassee Witch. In 1889, Elizabeth Budd Graham was buried in the Old City Cemetery in Tallahassee. The 23-year-old was a wife and mother whose life was not overly remarkable. Locals have always found it strange then that her tomb is perhaps the grandest in the whole cemetery. Local legend says the reason is because Elizabeth was a witch. As with Christian tradition, the other graves faced east, but Elizabeth's faces west, the exact opposite. Her gravestone has a poem by Edgar Allan Poe engraved on it, which reads, "Ah, broken is the golden bowl, the spirit flown forever. Let the bell toll, a saintly soul floats on a Stygian river. Come, let the burial rite be read, the funeral song be sung, an anthem for the queenliest dead that died so young, a dirge for her, the doubly dead, in that she died so young." Now some people believe this holds clues to her being a witch. Broken in a bowl is said to refer to her killing a vampire. Doubly dead refers to witchcraft, as a witch must be killed twice to die. To this day, locals have reported modern day witches visiting her grave to pay their respects. Coming at number 6 now, we have the Gator Men. I'm sure any of you who are from Florida will know that it's famous for alligators, but have you heard of the Gator Men? Yes, there are allegedly half human, half alligator hybrids that live in Florida's Everglades. Going way back to the 1700s, you can find reports of these creatures. The top half is always said to resemble a human, but by the time you get below the waist, everything changes. They are said to have webbed feet, scales and tails. Not everything is an even split along the body though. Witnesses have reported that their teeth are not human-like. They say they're jagged and resemble alligator teeth more closely. They're said to be highly intelligent, aggressive and cunning creatures that travel in groups and even have their own guttural language. Without any recorded sightings though, the Gator Men remain swamped in urban legend. Moving on to number 5 now, we have the Devil's Chair. Legend says that in a graveyard in Casadaga, Florida, is a chair that belongs to the devil himself. It's a wide brick bench that was supposedly built by the devil. Every night at midnight, the devil returns to sit in this chair. It's meant only for him, and if you sit in it, he will have his revenge. Locals say that he whispers evil ideas in your ear while you're in the chair, ideas that will haunt you forever and send you down a spiral of evil doings that will result in you going to hell, where you can join him forever. Another strange addition to the legend is that if you leave a full unopened can of beer on the chair and return the next morning, the can will be empty but still unopened somehow. That's all I know. You'll just have to visit and try for yourself if you want to know more. Moving on to number 3 now, we have the ghost of the St. Augustine Lighthouse. Built in 1874, this lighthouse started out normal, being passed from owner to owner. That was until it came into the hands of Peter Rasmussen. His spirit is said to have imbued itself with a lighthouse. Now he was said to be absolutely obsessed with cigars, smoking multiple ones a day. All these years on, staff report smelling cigar smoke years after Peter died. Another legend involves a pair of girls, Eliza and Mary Pitty. They were playing in the nearby waters in the late 1800s while their mother worked on the lighthouse. In a tragic accident, the girls drowned. Staff say their laughter can still be heard from the top of the lighthouse every single night. Next up at number 2 now, we have Spook Hill. In the town of Lake Wales, you can find Spook Hill. Locals will tell you that it's a must-see for anyone interested reported it in the paranormal, although you may have already thought that based on the name. Legend says that if you stop your car on the right spot on Spook Hill and put it in neutral, you can experience your car rolling uphill. Most people are happy to just experience it, be a little bit scared and then move on. But for those of you who want to know the creepy side of things, you'll be pleased to know that there is a story meant to explain this. A nearby sign reads, "Many years ago an Indian village on Lake Wales was plagued by raids of a huge gator. The chief, a great warrior, killed the gator in a battle that created a small lake. The chief was buried on the north side. Pioneer male riders first discovered their horses labouring downhill, thus naming it Spook Hill. When the road was paved, cars coasted uphill. Is this the gator seeking revenge, or the chief still trying to protect his land?" And finally, number 1 now, guys, we have Robert the Doll. Now, I've talked about this doll a lot on this channel, and it never gets any less creepy. In 1906, Robert Eugene Tott was given a doll as a boy in Florida. It was a gift from his nanny, who also dabbled in voodoo. The 40-inch tall doll was made of wood, stuffed with wool, and wore a sailor outfit. This is where it gets confusing. Robert gave up his name to the doll. He just gave it up and started calling himself Gene instead. Gene spoke to Robert the doll all the time and swore the doll was real. Eventually, even neighbors began to think that they heard the doll whisper back, change its expression, or even move by itself. Some local children once claimed they saw the doll looking out of the top window of the family's home. The family began to think that their son's doll might be possessed. Yeah, I would too. No matter how much they wanted to get rid of the doll though, Gene just wouldn't let go of it. He kept this creepy doll for the rest of his life. These days the doll sits in a glass box at the Fort East Martello Museum. Despite the glass and the years that have passed, even the sight of him creeps some people out.
Alright, coming in at number 10 we have Lechuza. Ooh, I love a good owl, but this one is not your average mouse catcher. Lechuza is a shape-shifting witch who flies through the night hunting for prey. While in flight, she may look like an owl. When a Lechuza is stopped, they have bird bodies and human faces, so basically a lot like a harpy. The women seem to be hybrid monsters, as in their human lives they were said to have sold their soul to the devil, who gave them intense magical powers in exchange for their souls. How do you know you're in the presence of a Lechuza? Well, they'll let you know by a series of whistling and baby noises. Those who try and investigate what the noises are will likely become dinner for the owly she-witches. Not great. Coming in at number 9 we have the Tubac Cabra. Ah, the legend of the Tubac Cabra. This one isn't constricted to Texas alone. The Tubac Cabra story first sprang up in Puerto Rico. It is said to be a blood-sucking monster from the deep that attacks animals and drinks the blood of livestock, especially goats, which is why the creature's name translates to goat sucker in Spanish. Anyway, in Texas, reports of the Tubac Cabra were rife in the year 2007 when a woman named Phyllis Canyon reported seeing one of the blood-sucking monsters at her ranch in South Texas. She also reportedly found a number of chickens with their throats torn open. This sparked a whole Tubac Cabra panic, and the legend of the beast was firmly consolidated in the Lone Star State law. Coming into number 8 we have the Chinese Cemetery. There is a strange urban legend surrounding a 7-foot-tall ghost and her lover at the Lona China Cemetery in Texas. This isn't just your classic ghost haunting in a graveyard, except actually I guess it is, only there's a freakishly tall ghost. The story goes that a man wanted to run away with his lover of Chinese descent, but he was forbade by his great-grandfather who owned the cemetery. The issue here was an issue of race. The man was Anglo-Hispanic, but his granddie didn't want him mixing. I bet that old racist isn't pleased that the cemetery is now called the Chinese Cemetery. Hey. Anyway, both the ghost of the tall woman and the man are said to roam the cemetery at night looking for one another, but sadly they never quite meet, which is pretty depressing. Apparently the female has been known to reach out and touch you, thinking that you might be the lost love. Sends shivers up my spine. Ooh. Coming in at number 7 we have the legend of Midget Mansion. Not the most politically correct name, but it seems that Midget Mansion is the name this urban legend is best known by in San Antonio. It seems that the house in question is a mansion with low-hanging fixtures and ceilings custom built for a family of small people. A husband and a wife and their normal-sized children took up residence residency in this home. The father was said to be a respected businessman in the 1920s and was well liked in the community, who found him to be a novel addition. It seems sadly the man went mad one day and murdered his entire family. Well, with the murders and the odd size of the home, nobody really wanted to buy it, so it fell into disrepair. It seems that the ghostly sounds emanating from the building and strange shadows lurked for many years. A lot of people who went to the abandoned house felt a malicious presence. From my research, it seems that the old house has finally been pulled down in favour of condos. However, the ghostly presence, the trauma of the family left behind, is apparently still rife in folklore. Coming into number 6, we have El Cucuy. Am I saying this right, Texas? Let me know, cause I'm just a humble British gal who has no idea really. So these urban legends come around so much, I honestly feel like in every country and within that a lot of provinces and states have their own version. El Cucuy is a Texan bogeyman, but worse apparently. Now the legend describes the beast as male, small, humanoid with glowing red eyes. El Cucuy hides in closets and under beds and comes for naughty children in the night. While this does seem like your classic boogeyman stuff, it seems that there have been some reported sightings of El Cucuy over the years. Now this leads me to think that actually maybe there is something more to this urban legend after all. Coming into number 3, we have Demon's Road. It just isn't an urban legend video without a spooky haunted road, is it? No. It's not. In Huntsville, Texas, there is a stretch of road called Bowden Road, although locals will tell you that it's called Demon's Road. Why? Well, because of the demonic things that have reportedly happened along it. Oh, and there's a cemetery at the end of the road, which doesn't really help matters. A whole bunch of Huntsville residents have had weird experiences along the road or seen strange things, but this isn't just your average haunted road. It seems that oftentimes spectres will follow people home. One popular story associated with Demon's Road is that a woman was visiting the cemetery at the end of the road when she saw a man lurking. Now, the man was acting a bit weirdly, he was pacing up and down, but she didn't pay him much attention. After that, as she was journeying home, she thought she saw the same man walking on the road, but once again, she just ignored it. When she got home, however, she thought she saw the same man staring at her from her bathroom mirror while she was in the shower. She screamed, he disappeared, and she never saw him again. Creepy.
Next up at number 9 now, we have Haunted Harper's Ferry. Harper's Ferry is a very picturesque town in West Virginia, full of dozens of 19th century buildings and old shops, restaurants and inns. All of those old buildings though are said to be the reason why this town always makes the list of the most haunted places in America. It was the site of many Civil War battles, and locals say their restless spirits still walk the streets and pass through the old stone walls. Alyssa Lavasseur, manager of the town's museum, once said, "The whole town is haunted. People have seen things. You can probably ask anyone in town who has been living here or works here, and they have seen something. They can't deny it." It may seem like a bold claim, but it seems that it's true. The townspeople are all in agreement that their homes are also home to ghosts. Regular sightings include wounded soldiers, an old priest, and a phantom army troop performing one of their marching drills. Sounds annoying, and you probably can't ask them to keep it down. Next up at number 8 now, we have the Unknown Stranger. Today, in the town of Middleway, you can visit a grave where the marked name on it is simply the Unknown Stranger. The story goes way back to 1794. A travelling stranger was staying at a boarding house in Middleway when he fell gravely ill. He called the owner of the board house, Adam Livingston, to his bedside and told him he was Catholic. He begged to be given his last rites by a Catholic priest. Livingston was a Lutheran and knew of no Catholic priest nearby. The stranger begged and begged, but his request would be his last dying breath. In the years since then, locals say the Unknown Stranger haunts the old boarding house and even the town at large. They say he is a vengeful spirit, unable to pass on because he didn't get the last rites he so desperately wanted. Today, you can go to the grave of the Unknown Stranger, but some still fear his wrath will return against them. Coming in at number 7 now, we have the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. This building was a psychiatric hospital that became operational in 1864. For almost 100 years, it took in some of the most troubled and disturbed minds in West Virginia. It was only built to house about 250 patients, but began to take on more than it could handle. By the 1950s, it had reached its peak and housed over 2,400 patients who were all jammed into these overcrowded and poor conditions. Despite this, the asylum limped on for another 40 years until it was finally closed to patients in 1994. Now, people say it's haunted by the thousands of tortured souls who eked out a miserable existence there in their lives. Those who have dared to visit it report doors slamming, shadowy figures and blood-curdling screams from within the building's crumbling walls. Many locals stay well clear of it, but brave visitors can take special ghost tours right through the asylum where they say things go bump in the night almost every night. Next up at number 6 now, we have the Northbend Rail Trail, Tunnel number 19. That's a mouthful. Tunnel number 19 is also known as the Silver Run Tunnel. In 1910, a train engineer got the shock of his life when he saw that there, stood in front of the tunnel they were about to go into, was a girl. She was described as having pitch black hair and bloodless skin. She was wearing a white dress and didn't seem to fear the train that was barreling towards her. At first he thought she must have been sleepwalking. He slammed the brakes on the train, but she didn't move. Then, just as the train was about to hit her, she screamed and jumped straight up into the air. When he asked the next station master about this, he told him not to worry, as several others had reported the exact same sight. A new engineer called O'Flannery didn't believe that this ghost was real. On his first run, he sped towards the tunnel. It was foggy and there was a full moon. He spotted the woman in white but kept on going. The ghost screamed and shot straight up. When he reached his first station, there was a crowd waiting. He asked what was going on and was told that as his train passed each station, people were trying to warn him that there was a girl riding the front of the train, her arms outstretched, and she was screaming. He found nothing on the front of his train and requested a transfer almost immediately. Some still report seeing her outside the tunnel even to this day. Next up at number 5 now, we have the Grey Flats Ghost. Locals in the town of Beckley will sometimes warn people before hiking the nearby Grey Flats Trail. It runs through ancient and eerie woods. Old farms pepper the outskirts, brambles and rotting oak trees mingle, and the canopy of leaves can snuff out any light trying to break through the darkness. Naturally, the trail has earned a reputation for hauntings. I found one story from a hiker that goes a little like this. It was nearly dusk in late October and it was cold and drizzly, and though that made seeing difficult, what we saw was plainly visible. At the point on the Grey Flats Trail where trees move in close, we saw a black figure in what might have been a long coat and a broad-rimmed hat. Though man-shaped, it had no obvious depth, as no light fell upon it. It was completely black, and rather than moving like a person, it moved without walking, and it moved to the side, away from us, up through the trees, away from the road toward what might have been the farmhouse. And though the rocky ground rose, the figure did not. It appeared to move into the earth. As soon as it disappeared into the ground, my friend Becky began to get sick. She held her hands over her stomach and bent down and began to let out a kind of long sob. We asked her if she was alright, and she shook her head yes, that she just wanted to go home, so we grabbed her by the arms and went back out towards Ship Rock. Just as we were getting ready to turn onto the old farm trail, we looked back and saw the shape again. It appeared to be emerging from the ground and heading down toward where the old strip mines were. Very creepy story. Their words, not mine. I'm definitely creeped out though. Moving on to number 4 now, we have Blennerhassett Hotel. This hotel in St. Parkersburg seemed normal from the outside, but everyone will tell you it's what goes on inside that's made it famous among ghost hunters. It was built by William Chancellor in the late 19th century. Over 100 years on from that, locals say it's haunted by the very man who built it. There are consistent reportings and documented happenings of hauntings there going back decades. Visitors say that several spirits actually haunt the old hotel, but William is probably the most well known. He appears as an old man in a 3-piece grey suit. They say his hair and beard are slicked back and that he sometimes wears a top hat and a cane. The spirit is said to look solid until he disappears in a puff of cigar smoke. Some of the other spirits include the children. These small child ghosts are said to play tag and hide and seek throughout the day and at night. Some of the staff report hearing whistlings as if someone was trying to get their attention, but they look up to find that nobody is there. The cooks in the kitchen say they feel tugging on their sleeves while they're trying to cook. I wonder if you can ever get used to a feeling like that. Next up at number 3 now, we have the Whipple Company Store. From 1890 to 1964, this building served as the company store for the local mine. Over the years though, it began to take on more responsibilities. At first, it became a meeting place for town events, then it hosted ballroom dances, and then it became an embalmer's. That's right, the town's dead were embalmed in the basement there, with bodies being stored until their funerals. With all of this energy, it's no surprise that many ghost hunters have been drawn to this building. There have been reports of people smelling coal dust or hearing strange whispering voices all over the building. There have even been a few apparitions of miners. It's a unique building because of how it's built. They say you can stand in the middle and hear everything that's happening in the whole building, even a whisper. So if you do visit, there's almost no way you're missing a ghostly apparition. We're jumping right into the deep end with our number 10, the Moth Man. Let's go back to November 12th, 1966. 5 men were digging a grave at a cemetery in Clenadin when they claimed they saw a man-like figure fly out of the trees and over their heads. 3 days later, 2 young couples from Point Pleasant told police they saw a large creature with red glowing eyes in their car headlights. They described it as a large flying man with 10-foot wings. It was following them near an old World War II munitions plant. The legend of the Moth Man was born. In the days after, more people reported seeing him. 2 firemen described it as a large bird with red eyes. About 90 miles away, a man from Salem said he saw a creature in the back of his barn with 2 red circle eyes like bicycle reflectors. For the next year, everyone was on edge, expecting to see the Mothman swooping down on them at any moment. Then, on December 15, 1967, the Silver Bridge collapsed in Point Pleasant, resulting in the deaths of 46 people. Now, engineers blamed a defect in the suspension chain. Others said the Mothman sightings had something to do with it. As the years went by, experts tried to explain away all the different sightings, saying it was hallucinations or sleep paralysis. The Mothman story went cold for about 50 years. Then, in November 2016, WCHS-TV published a photo from an anonymous man that people claimed was the Mothman. See for yourself what you make of this famous urban legend picture. If you're excited to play the next Fallout game, it might not be that long till you meet the Mothman for yourself. Next up at number 9 now, we have the Snarly Yow. Some call this the Vanishing Dog, the Black Dog, or even the Dog Fiend. Whatever people in West Virginia call it though, this phantom dog has been seen by a lot of people. It's described as large, black, and teeth-bearing, appearing in front of people's cars on the dark mountain roads, but when they hit it and get out to check, the dog has disappeared into thin air. It was first sighted in the early 1800s, where it would chase people on horseback, in carriages, or donkey carts. It has continued this habit into modern times, only now it can be seen keeping pace with cars going at 55 miles per hour. If be told, locals don't really know how fast this thing can actually go. Although many people have reported seeing the creature, it has never actually harmed anyone as of yet. This kind of unnerves some people though, who worry, what does it really want from the people it terrorizes? Moving on to number 8 now, we have the Sheep Squatch. This one is also known as the White Creature, a monster said to roam the Kanawha Valley. It's been described as a bear with the shape of a dog, if you can imagine that. It has huge saber-like fangs. Its wool is a dirty white color, hence the sheep part of its name. Despite its lumbering appearance, the creature is fast, moving at lightning speed. Perhaps what's most creepy is its tendency to switch from 4 legs to 2 when it moves, making it seem very human-like. Its screams in the night have been compared to the sound of someone being murdered. Then there are the attacks. Here's where things get really weird. People always say that the creature jumps on them like a wolf, sinking its teeth right into their flesh, making them howl out in pain, but then when the attack is over, they look down to find there is not a single mark on their body. That's better news than an actual mortal wound, I guess, but most people who have seen the Sheep Squatch hope to never again. Next up at number 7 now, we have the Flatwoods Monster. Some also call this the Green Monster or the Phantom of Flatwoods. The legend of it began in 1952 after a group of children claimed they saw a UFO crash behind a hill not far from the town. They went out and told Kathleen May, a local hairdresser, who came with them to inspect the crash site. From the top of the hill, they saw a pulsing red light. Then their flashlights landed on what they described as a man-like figure with a round red face surrounded by a pointed hood-like shape. They said he was 10 foot tall. His eyes emitted greenish orange light. His body was dark green in color. Kathleen May said it had small claw-like hands and a head that resembled the ace of spades. According to the group, it made a hissing sound as it approached them. One of the kids dropped the flashlight in fear and they all fled the scene. Some have said the sighting was nothing more than a common barn owl, but many in the the town believe it to be true. Even the welcome sign says Flatwoods is the home of the green monster. Next up at number 6 now we have the Grafton Monster. As the name might suggest, this comes from the old railroad town of Grafton. There may not be room for a mysterious creature among the many buildings and houses there, but the place is surrounded by dense woodland, and that's where locals say the Grafton Monster lurks. Ever since the 1960s, people have reported seeing a man-like creature resembling Bigfoot or the Skunk Ape. They say it stands between 7 and 9 feet tall and is cloaked in pale skin that is slick to the touch, kind of like a seal or dolphins. Local farmers report it the most, saying it tears down their fences and strips their trees of fruit. Those who have got close enough described it as being able to run extremely fast and having a foul odour. Perhaps the strangest description, although rarer than the rest, is that the Grafton Monster is headless. Others say witnesses are mistaken and it only appears headless because it tucks its head low to its chest. Some say you'll know it's near when it lets out a low whistle through the trees. Next up now at number 5 we have the Bunny Man. This one sounds cute, right? You guys might have thought we were taking a quick break from scary halfway through the video. Or no, it's just getting worse. The Bunny Man legend began with 2 incidents in Fairfax County in 1970. The first came from Air Force Cadet Robert Bennett and his fiancée. On October 9th, the couple were returning from a football game around midnight. They parked up to visit a relative when out of nowhere a figure ran up to the back of their car and smashed the front passenger window in. They looked up to see a man in a white suit with long bunny ears. The Bunny Man screamed that they were on private property and trespassing. The couple sped away and later found a hatchet that was used to smash the window on the floor of their car. 10 days later, a construction man called Paul Phillips was on the same road. He approached a man standing on the porch of an unfinished home. He described him as wearing a grey, black and white bunny costume. The Bunny Man began chopping at a porch post with a long-handled axe, saying, "All you people trespass around here. If you don't get out of here, I'm going to bust you on the head." The police investigation was closed due to the lack of evidence, but more than 50 other people came forward claiming to have seen the Bunny Man, many of them on that same stretch of road. Even to this day, locals have reported seeing freshly skinned rabbit carcasses hanging from the overpass of what is now known as Bunny Man Bridge, a sure sign that this axe-wielding fiend is nearby, waiting to bust you on the head. Next up at number 2 now we have the Ogua. Quite simply, the Ogua is a river monster. It's said to lurk in the waters of the Monongahela River in Marion County. Its legend goes back to Native American tribes who lived along the riverbanks there many years ago. It's said to be a serpentine creature of up to 500 pounds in weight with a reddish brown colour and deadly razor-sharp teeth. It's also amphibious and has been known to clamber onto land if it needs to. It stays hidden in the waters during the day, coming onto land at night to hunt for prey. Apparently, it even hunts deer. Yeah, fully grown deer. It waits along their paths and then thrashes them into submission with its tail before dragging them into the river to devour. Of course, if it can bring down a deer, it wouldn't have much trouble with a human. Some people don't even go near the places where it's sighted, at least not alone. And finally, number 1 now we have Dro Mountain. On this mountain, there was once a very fierce battle during the American Civil War. Many lost their lives, and the blood spilled that day is said to have soaked into the very mountain itself, changing it forever. They say the cries of war still linger on Dro Mountain, forever lost in time. Visitors have reported that something just feels off when you're up there. At night, there is no mistaking it at all. One woman who was raised beside the mountain reported seeing a man standing up on the old battlefield. His body glowed in the darkness and, to her astonishment, he had no head. Whenever they shone a light on him, he disappeared. Another time, the woman was walking with her husband and cousins when the whole group stopped in their tracks. Up there again on the old battlefield was a transparent soldier on his horse. The soldier seemed to notice them before turning away and vanishing into the trees. Even skeptics have reported seeing the figure of a headless man drifting along. Those who have got close say he is wearing a Confederate uniform. Now others say his head isn't actually missing, it's just been shot off. To be honest, I'm not really sure which one of those is scarier. But either way, don't think I'd head up Dro Mountain at night by myself.
Number 8. Theater Center. This would make horror movies so much better. I imagine you get to watch a movie about ghosts in a place that's actually haunted by ghosts. Amazing. The theater center is apparently haunted by the ghost of an usher. The usher was killed in the theater by a jealous boyfriend when he was stabbed. On the bright side, this would mean you would get free movies for eternity. I mean, there's way worse places you could die. Imagine if you died in a paint store and then you had to haunt this place for the rest of time. The most exciting part of your day would be when they bring in the new fall colors. Wow, there's 11 shades shades of brown. Exciting. Number 7. Civil War Ghost. I guess the benefits of being a ghost after a war is you get to see how everything happened. You're either like, I can't believe what the world has come to, or you're like, man, I was really the bad guy this whole time. Over on the Thompson Island Bridge in San Marcos, Texas, a Civil War ghost is taken post and he will never leave. The backstory on this ghoulie is he pops up whenever a war is happening. So for America, that means this guy's working overtime. Also, it said he can't leave because he made a promise to his brother that he'll make it home alive no matter what. I think it's time this guy took an L and just moved on to the afterlife. Number 5. Marfa Lights. We're jetting over to the little town of Marfa, Texas. In this little old country town, there's some pretty weird happenings appearing right in the sky. The Marfa Lights are these balls of light that appear out of nowhere, like someone floating in midair is lighting off an M80. There has been so much speculation on what it could be. Some people think it's spirits floating around doing a little dance for the people watching. Just because you're dead doesn't mean you don't want attention. Other people think that it could be aliens. They think that they travel between this spot in Marfa and wherever these aliens have come from. They can use this spot to take samples of the earth, like a little school trip. But scientists have said that it's just balls of gas lighting up in the air. Boring scientists always ruining our fun. But hey, there's still hope that they're just trying to cover up some actual alien activity. Number 3. Camp Lulu Sam's. Camp's great, guys. You make a bunch of friends, you do a bunch of arts and crafts, and occasionally one of the camp counselors will go crazy and murder everyone. Yay! Who needs sunscreen? The legend behind Camp Lulu Sam's is it was an all-girls camp, and one night one of the counselors lost their mind and killed a bunch of the people at the camp. It says you can still hear the screams of children when you're on the property at night. However, if you check the history books, there's nothing about a mass murder at the camp. So this might have been made up to spook some of the kids who come to stay there. Number 2. Bigfoot. Yes, I know Bigfoot was originally spotted in North Carolina, but there have been many sightings of the possible missing link in the Lone Star State. I mean, if you're a Bigfoot, I can't imagine you believe in borders. You just kind of go anywhere you please whenever you want and try to not get shot and make sure you're always out of focus. Although I do think that Texas would be one of the worst places for a Bigfoot to travel. They're covered in hair and Texas is almost always hot. There's cowboys and trackers all over the place who would probably love to hunt you down, and there's so many guns. I would definitely put Bigfoot on the list of things that are totally fine on site. But the old ape man is really popular in Texas. There's even a group in Beeville called the Bee County Bigfoot Research Group that is dedicated to finding out the truth about Bigfoot. I wonder if they get paid for that, if they just do it out of the goodness of their hearts.
Starting us off at number 10, the Hanging Jail. Actually called the Beauregard Parish Jail, it opened in 1915 and it was actually kind of a big deal because it had extraordinary amenities for a jail. Each cell had a window and a bathroom, and cells on the top floor even had a skylight. But despite its beautiful architecture, it was also the site of Louisiana's first double execution. In 1926, 2 men were committed after killing and robbing a taxi driver and sentenced to be hanged. They claimed innocence, but still the verdict passed and the 2 men died in the jail, giving it the infamous name. It remained open until 1981, and now a museum. It's believed to be haunted by the 2 men along with other inmates who felt they were unjustly put behind bars. Many have reported being pushed or hearing voices while visiting, and some have even captured photos of strange, inexplicable, shadowy figures lurking on the porch and window, leaving no other explanation than to assume the jail remains a haunted and terrifying place to visit. Coming in at number 9, Pleasant Hall. This story has 2 versions, so I will let you decide which one you think is true. Once upon a time, while attending the Louisiana State University, a resident tragically took her life in the now infamous room 312. One story says the girl killed her boyfriend in a fit of rage and then, shocked at her actions, took her own life because she could not live with what she had done. The other story claims the girl jumped out of the window of her room and fell to her impending doom, terrifying the students on campus that witnessed the horrifying sight. But which one really happened? Well, it seems that is the hard part to find out. But what's not difficult to know is that the spirit of the girl remains, haunting Pleasant Hall to this day. Students have reported seeing her ghost roam the campus and hearing strange noises coming from the other side of room 312. And sometimes at night, when you least expect it, the door to room 312 will open and shut all all on its own. Coming in at number 8, St. Louis Cemetery number 1. Regarded as the city of the dead, the St. Louis Cemetery number 1 holds more ghost stories than you'd want to encounter in a lifetime. In the span of a mere block, the cemetery has over 700 tombs and over 100,000 bodies are known to be buried at the site. Most famously, it is the burial site of Voodoo Queen Marie Laveau, the most revered and feared practitioner in New Orleans history. Reports of her ghost have detailed her in her signature red and white turban, and claim she will suddenly appear out of nowhere and then vanish from plain sight just as fast. Visitors have experienced scratching, pinching, shoving, suddenly becoming ill, and even hearing her haunting voice echo across the cemetery, sending many that have dared to visit running for the hills. So just be careful if you choose to stop by. If you aren't careful, she could curse you for life. Next up at number 7, the Calcasieu Courthouse. The history of capital punishment is a torrid one, and as it turns out, this courthouse is actually famous for just that. Back in the 1940s, there was a woman named Toni Jo McCuiston. She lived quite a tumultuous life involved in drugs and her local brothel, but one day she fell in love with a man who frequented her establishment named Claude Henry, and so they got married and she started to really turn her life around. But after Claude was sent to jail for 50 years for killing someone, something inside Toni snapped. She planned to bust Claude out of jail with a friend, but in the process of stealing a car, killed the owner and left him in a ditch. She was caught and sentenced to death and would become the first ever woman to be executed by the electric chair in Louisiana. It's said her spirit still haunts the courthouse, locking doors and messing around with the filing systems during the day. But steer clear at night, as residents report you can smell her burning hair and hear her unruly screams echo through the streets. Coming in at number 6, Pea Farm. Nicknamed the Pea Farm, it is not actually a farm, nor does it have anything to do with peas. It is, however, an old abandoned prison. The facility was in operation between 1905 to 1950, and rumor has it that life was incredibly rough and difficult at the Pea Farm for prisoners, even more so than your typical prison. Beatings and lashings were commonplace, and even killing of prisoners was nothing to bat an eye at. So it's no surprise that those whose life may have ended here have stuck around, maybe trying to seek revenge on those who hurt them. Today, the prison is strictly off limits to visitors, but those that walk past have reported hearing shrieks and other strange noises coming from inside the abandoned building. Maybe no one is allowed for a good reason. Next up at number 5, Bonnie and Clyde's ambush site. Maybe you've heard of the infamous couple, but just in case you haven't, let me catch you up. They were notorious bank robbers across Louisiana and Texas during the Great Depression in America and made quite a name for themselves. In recent years, it has been suggested their exploits were exaggerated, but one thing that wasn't is how they died. The day was May 23rd, 1934, and police from both Louisiana and Texas managed to corner them in their stolen car. Authorities fired more than 100 bullets at the couple, and as the story goes, you could hear Bonnie's scream from the next town over. Residents claim that if you visit the site of their death, the ghosts of the couple will make themselves well known to you. Apparitions have shown in photographs, and some have even heard what they believe to be Bonnie's scream as she took her last few breaths on this earth. Coming in at number 4, Oak Alley. Once upon a time, it was one of the largest plantations in Louisiana, and just like every other of its kind, it has a dark past. Since its dark days, it has turned into a bed and breakfast and historical site, but the people that were tortured remain, haunting the ground and terrorizing visitors. Numerous accounts have claimed to hear unexplained sounds like blood-curdling screams in the middle of the night, or the sound of a horse-drawn carriage clopping along the path. Some visitors have even experienced being touched or grabbed by an unseen entity, and one investigator got so scared he dropped his camera while trying to capture a spirit. Paranormal investigators have managed to capture several EVPs that indicate unhappy ghosts lingering the property, and though no one has been hurt staying here yet, tread carefully as you never know just when you could set the spirits off. Coming in at number 3, Alice's grave. Alice died in the 19th century, and although she had a fairly normal life while alive, her death and afterlife were anything but expected. She was laid to rest in an above-ground grave, but soon after, many of the townspeople began to question, was the grave haunted, or worse, was Alice a witch? As the legend goes, in the middle of the night, the large slab of marble covering her grave was removed on 3 separate occasions, and each time, her remains were left outside the grave. No one stepped forward admitting to have moved Alice or the slab, which led people to believe that Alice was a witch trying to escape her grave and haunt the town. Eventually, large iron bars were placed over the grave in an attempt to hold her spirit inside. But this hasn't seemed to stop her, as locals claim you can still see her wandering the cemetery at night. But just exactly what is she looking for? That is one of the many unanswered questions that leave visitors terrified, unsure if she comes in peace or if she is out for revenge. Next up at number 2, the Manack Swamp. While many are familiar with the legendary voodoo priestess Marie Laveau, she was not the only one of her time. Julia Brown was a well-respected healer and midwife who resided in a small village called Frenier. At first, she loved caring for her village, but after some time she started to feel disrespected by her community, feeling as though they were taking her gifts for granted. Julia began scaring the village, telling them dooming predictions about their impending deaths, and the townspeople, unsure if she was placing a curse or foretelling their future, became very troubled. Shortly before her own death, she said, "One day I'm gonna die and I'm gonna take all you with me." And just days after she was buried, 3 entire villages were destroyed by a hurricane and hundreds of lives were lost. To this day, many believe the spirit of Julia Brown haunts the swamp, and visitors have reported hearing blood-curdling screams and the sound of her voice singing cryptic and frightening songs, terrifying all those that dare walk by. And last up in our number 1 spot, La Laurie Mansion. Arguably one of the most infamous buildings in all of Louisiana, La Laurie Mansion was once home to the cruel and torturous Madame Delphine La Laurie. Even in her time, she was regarded as a monster and was known to have her slaves taken from her on more than one occasion due to their outrageous mistreatment. In 1834, a fire broke out in her mansion, and when police and fire marshals arrived at the site, they found one of her slaves chained to the stove, claiming to have started the fire to try and take her own life to escape the cruelty. Another 7 victims were found in her attic, suspended from the ceiling, mutilated and barely alive, stating to have been imprisoned for months. Once news broke out of her cruelties, citizens attacked the house and demolished everything they could. While the original building no longer stands, the grounds it stood on are some of the most haunted in all of Louisiana, as it's believed nearly 100 people lost their lives under Madame Delphine's cruel supervision. Visitors have reported feeling the violent touches of ghostly hands, and a medium that visited stated that there is a very dark demonic entity that resides within the building's walls. So just tread carefully. Should you choose to visit, the spirits that live there are not too thrilled by visitors in their home.
Number 10. Tennessee State Prison. Coming up first on our list of spots to avoid when you're driving through America at its best is Tennessee State Prison. I mean, hell, you probably want to avoid that on a good day, let alone if it's haunted. Though the prison may have shut its doors in 1993, it's remained a popular spot for dark tourists and paranormal enthusiasts who snuck in on some less than legal means to try and scope out if there's still any lingering spirits hanging around Old Sparky, the nickname given to the infamous electric chair inside the prison, which served as the last seat for countless inmates. Those who've been brave enough to venture forth have reported hearing unexplained clanging, a dragging of chains, footsteps following them as they walk through the empty halls, and feelings of inescapable dread approaching Old Sparky. Maybe that's a sign it's best to let the dead lie. And hey, my friends, hope you're all having a good holiday, but if you're looking for a reason to sneak away from the table for a bit, why not click through, spend the rest of the day with the most amazing gang, watch our videos, and toss a subscribe if you're feeling that generous. Okay, moving on, no more plugs, don't worry. Number 9, the Wheatlands Plantation. The Wheatlands Plantation has a surprisingly high amount of bloodshed packed onto one property. It's no wonder it's considered one of the most haunted spots in the entire state. In all the years since its construction, at least 70 people have lost their lives there on one property. Through battles in the Revolutionary War and Civil Wars, what contributed to a majority of the body count. Although in one famous case, after the estate was willed to the grandson of the owner, the grandson's jealous father tried to take it by force. A brawl ensued and the father was slain by a fire poker. Although the blood has been washed from the floor countless times, visitors say that it keeps reappearing without fail. If you're curious, the Wheatlands Plantation offers guided ghost tours for those looking to set out on a little spectral sightseeing. You wanna go too, Evie? You wanna go on a little spectral sightseeing ghost tour, see a ghost? Number 8. The Christopher Taylor House. The Christopher Taylor House is probably the oldest house in the entire state. It was first built all the way back in 1777. It was a fresh new cabin for a fledgling developing country. With a house that old, you're bound to have accumulated some spirits over the years, no doubt. Well, maybe the original owners liked the place so much they just never wanted to leave, as visitors to the Taylor House have claimed that they see people with a knack for historical cosplay wandering around the property in 17th century attire. Now this could be people, late to a historical fair maybe, or it could still be the ghosts of the original owners. There's even rumors that the ghost of Andrew Jackson, America's 7th president and famous bad boy, still haunts the spot. One paranormal investigator claims that they talked to Andrew Jackson's ghost, who told them about a duel he had in 1778. God, he's still going on about that one, eh? Move on, man. It's been like 200 years. Number 7, Cragfont. Coming up next is the one and only Cragfont. Cragfont is a historic house in Tennessee, formerly owned by one James Winchester, who was an army general. He built the house personally in 1798. Setting out to make a castle fit for an esteemed revolutionary general like Winchester. Winchester lived a quiet life in the home, but future residents wouldn't be so lucky. Country music star Conway Twitty, who no doubt is infinitely more famous for being the butt of a lot of Family Guy jokes than he is a country music star, once reported after staying at the house he had to leave after he was being pelted by flying objects that were thrown around the house. The Cragfont House offers ghost tours, where guests have reported seeing strange things in the upstairs nursery, claiming that when walking by, you can see candle lights being lit from inside, and sometimes the figures of people in 17th century attire, watching and waiting. Number 6, Shiloh National Park. Any place where a massive amount of death and suffering is occurred is bound to be a supernatural spot for haunted activity. Well, in 1862, during the Battle of Shiloh, which is part of the Civil War, there were over 23,000 casualties, which at the time was more bloodshed that occurred in any American war up to that point, and all of this was in one single battle at one single national park. So is it any surprise then that park goers claim that sometimes they can see the ponds of the park running red with blood? Or how many stories there are of people coming across the lost ghosts of Civil War soldiers wandering through reliving their final agonizing moments? Nothing more embarrassing, I imagine, than setting down the blanket for the family picnic only to have somebody lumbering over bleeding asking if you have any gauze you can put on his bayonet wound. Number 5, the Lots House. Another place with deep roots to the Civil War is the Lots House. This house saw the Battle of Franklin, an extremely bloody battle that took the lives of over 8,000 soldiers. The Lots family fled, obviously not looking to be a part of that, and when they returned, they found bodies stacked all over their property. Visitors claim that the Lots family is still trapped inside, and that you can see the ghost of a little girl wandering around lost, and the ghost of a woman can be seen from the 2nd floor, crying out for her lost loved ones. If you're curious enough to explore for yourself, the Lots House does offer ghost tours, but I feel like I should tell you. The Travel Channel once dubbed the Lots House the 2nd most terrifying place in America. And number 1 is your local Denny's at 3 in the morning. Number 4, Meeman Forest. Okay, I'm going to be totally level with you. When I started doing this video, I was researching haunted spots in Tennessee, and this one immediately stood out to me, and now I actually want to go there. The Meeman Forest is an absolutely picturesque, beautiful hiking trail, and it is also said to be home to one of Tennessee's most famous ghosts, the Pig Man. The ghost of a factory worker who is disfigured horribly, making his face look like that of a pig. And now in death, he wears the head of a pig over his own and wanders through the forest seeking victims and retribution. He's got his own bridge, Pigman Bridge, that was what lit me onto him. And if you're looking for him directly, legend says that if you're looking for an audience, you park your car in the middle of the bridge, flash your headlights 3 times in a row, and call out into the night, Pigman, and he'll make himself known to you. Whether or not you want his attention is another story entirely, or whether or not he'll be taking home you as the bacon. Bringing home the bacon. I was trying to do a pun there. You guys can cut that if that didn't work. Didn't make sense to me saying it either. Number 3, the Scott County Jail. The Scott County Jail was built in 1904, and almost a perfect 100 years later, closed its gates in 2008. Although it was a fair bit smaller than the average jail, only ever housing up to 50 inmates at a time during its operational period, it was still a jail. Susceptible to all the same pitfalls of any other jail, filled with people at their worst, powerful dark energy just swirling through the air. But this prison would get a second chance after serving out its sentence, and would reopen as a paranormal and true crime museum. The new owners claim that the spot is a hot spot for paranormal activity, and photos they've taken from inside the jail from fledgling ghost hunters show shadowy figures manifesting behind people on the tours. Eerie stuff. Now, is it all just stuff to drum up business for their tours, or could there really be something lingering in the Scott County Jail? You'll have to go yourself to find out. Number 2, the Nashville Cemetery. The Nashville Cemetery is one of the oldest cemeteries in the state, so it's no surprise that it's one of the most haunted as well. Otherwise, it wouldn't be on this list. I'm not going to tell you about a regular unhaunted cemetery. Among the many bodies laid to their final rest in this plot is one Ann Sanders, the ghost of a woman who, after running away from her husband after an argument, tragically plummeted to her death over a cliff above the Cumberland River. Her husband, distraught, pulled a piece of the boulder she fell off and had it carved into her headstone, installing a lantern up top so she could have a light to forever guide her in the afterlife. Isn't that sweet? Naturally, the headstone is very unusual and looks probably really different from all the other ones, and so it attracts a lot of attention from tourists coming to visit the cemetery. If the stories are to be believed, it's also attracting attention from spirits. People say late at night, usually after midnight, that they can hear wailing, crying, and sobbing seemingly emanating from the bizarre boulder headstones. Some stories as well say that they see a man in old attire who comes by at night to keep the lantern lit. Ugh, eerie. And finally, number 1, the Bell Witch Cave. Easily the most famous haunted spot in Tennessee, and maybe one of the most haunted spots in the entire country. The Bell Witch is a very famous urban legend dating back to the 19th century, where a farming family, the Bells, were relentlessly haunted and pursued by an evil entity of an old crone known now as the Bell Witch. There would be horrible creatures lurking around the farm, like these weird bunny dog chimeras. There was a constant laughing that sounded like it was coming from the walls. The children would complain of vermin attacking them in their sleep, and that's just the stuff I remember off by heart. If you look up the Bell Witch haunting, there is so much going on, and I'm surprised there's not more movies about it, to be honest. Once even, Andrew Jackson, 7th President of the United States, famous President Bad Boy, wanted to visit the Bell Witch property himself because he wanted to see if any of these rumors were true. But when he arrived, his horses outright refused to even approach the property. They froze up by the carriage. If that doesn't tell you the place is haunted, what will? Now, this spot in particular is the cave just a little bit outside the property. The whole place is haunted, but the cave is thought to be where the Bell Witch either made her home or where she fled to after she was finished with John Bell and his family. One legend says that when the Bell children went to explore the cave, one of them was pulled out by their feet by an invisible entity that had warned them not to go exploring inside of it. Now today, you can purchase a ticket to explore the Bell Witch Cave with a tour guide, but really, I'd say you should be careful about it. You should be careful about any cave you're going into, but you should be triply careful about one that famously possibly had a witch.
Starting us off at number 10, the Old Red Field Road. Said to be extremely active with spirits, keep your eyes peeled if you ever find yourself driving down this road. Those that try find that their flashlights and radios suddenly stop working, and some even say their cars begin acting up as soon as they start to approach. One driver in fact said that the hood of their car flew open on site, and when they went to go and check it out, there was no explanation for why it would have done that. Visitors claim that countless ghosts roam the road, walking up and down, likely coming from the nearby cemetery, and that they feel a sense of deep, unsettling anxiety until they turn off the Old Red Field Road. So maybe if you do visit, just find an alternate route. Next up at number 9, Cotter Bridge. Located in a small town of less than 900 people, during the day the bridge is a world-renowned hotspot for trout fishing, visited by residents and tourists alike. But things take a turn after the sun goes down, and locals say that this bridge is haunted by some truly terrifying spirits. Residents say that at night you can hear the cries of an infant coming from the bridge, and the sounds of young people playing for hours and hours. But most haunting of all is the woman who can be seen sprinting from vicious hounds. No one knows who she is or why she's being chased, but the fear of her screaming voice has scared residents from ever daring to get too close. Coming in at number 8, Fort Smith Courthouse. During the late 19th century, Fort Smith was the site of many sentenced to be hanged. In fact, it was rather notorious for it, as the presiding judge at the time, named Isaac C. Parker, got the nickname the Hanging Judge from sentencing a whopping 160 people to their death, 79 of which received the punishment. The hangings happened outside the courthouse in the gallows, perhaps as a warning sign for all to see what happened to criminals. And it's believed the condemned men of the jail still roam the grounds seeking revenge on Isaac Parker. Many today say they've had frightening experiences while at the courthouse, especially in the gallows. Visitors claim to have heard gavels banging, seen ropes swinging when there was no wind, and one groundskeeper even claims to have spoken with the ghost of Isaac Parker himself. Next up at number 7, the Clayton House. Originally built in the 1800s as a Civil War hospital, it wasn't until 1882 when William Clayton moved his family into the now historical home. The family seemed to have a fairly happy life in their home, but I guess with roots as a hospital, ghosts flock to it and continue to haunt it to this day. The former director of the site, Martha, says that as soon as she started working there, she knew something was off. Doors would slam in the middle of the night, she would hear footsteps from down the hall when no one was there, and one room on the second floor would always sound like music was playing from inside. Then, in 2008, a carpenter who was doing some repairs on the building took pictures to keep track of the progress, but when those photos got developed, he saw a woman dressed in brown lurking in the back of one of his photos. And he wasn't the only one to claim to have seen her lurking in the corners. After a while, Clayton's house had kind of a reputation, and so paranormal investigators started visiting. And using EVPs, they got recordings of a man shouting obscenities at someone named Anna, which piqued their interest as one of Clayton's daughters was named Anne. But maybe most terrifying was one woman who says that she was standing by herself in the hotel when her hair was tugged hard. She turned around to see who had snuck up on her, assuming it was a prank, but no one was around and she was all alone. Next up at number 6, the Toltec Mounds. A hiking trail might not be the first place you'd expect to be terrifyingly haunted, but it makes much more sense once you know that it leads through the remains of an ancient civilization. More officially referred to as the Plum Bayou Mounds, they were once home to a large group of people beginning around 600 AD. But what no one has been able to figure out since is their sudden and mysterious disappearance in 1050 AD. It's thought that the mounds were used for a variety of different purposes, but we know for sure that at least one was a burial ground, and as you can imagine, that is where most of the ghost sightings have occurred. Visitors who pass through the trail say they've seen strange apparitions of what looked like ancient people, along with mysterious orbs of light popping out of nowhere, and some say that if you walk by at night, you'll hear footsteps of the ancient civilization that will send you running as far away as you can. Coming in at number 5, the Basin Park Hotel. This hotel has long been the site of many paranormal sightings, although no one knows exactly why so many ghosts conjugate in this building. One belief is because the hotel possesses magical abilities due to the famous spring waters that it's built beside. During the 1800s, the indigenous people of the area talked about their holy springs, and it led many to believe that Eureka Springs had healing powers that could cure ailments and crippling conditions. Maybe these holy waters are what make the spirits more visible to the human eye today. Most famously, in room 307 lies the ghost of a cowboy who's been known to taunt the guests who stay there, waking them up in the middle of the night. Other entities that visitors claim to have witnessed are the young, translucent woman with steel blue eyes and cotton candy blonde hair, as well as a girl who runs around in pigtails and a yellow dress. Those that stay say they often see various orbs of light appearing around the grounds as if out of nowhere, and that objects will move all on their own very frequently. So if I were you, I'd just find a different hotel to stay at on your visit. Coming in at number 4, the King Opera House. While it's safe to assume you'd expect some kind of drama at the opera, usually it's left to the actors on stage. Said to be haunted by the ghost of a young actor named Charles Tolson, many believe they've seen the famous man roam the halls where he had his last performance ever. As the story goes, Tolson was a talented young man and owner of a traveling actors company that happened to be performing at the King Opera House for a week at the end of September in 1903. Tolson caught the eye of a young woman named Allie Parchman, who was just 17 but bored to death by her town and looking for adventure. But Allie's father got word that she intended to leave town with the young man and elope, and this made him furious. Her father ran down to the opera house to confront Tolson and kill him. When he arrived, he shot him 3 times, and although Tolson didn't die then, his life was over by the next day while in the hospital. Visitors of the opera house say they feel a strange sensation when they enter, like they're being watched constantly, and some even claim to have witnessed him lurking the halls in his Victorian cape and top hat. Next up at number 3, the Crescent Hotel and Spa. Not only is this Victorian beauty believed to be one of the most haunted places in Arkansas, but some have even said it might be one of the most haunted places in all of America. Before its time as a haunted hotel, it was a hospital run by a crooked doctor who fooled his cancer patients into thinking that there was a cure. So as you can imagine, it's riddled with spirits with a vengeance. Over the years, countless guests and staff have come forward telling their tales, claiming to have heard strange sensations, slamming doors, abrupt waking in the middle of the night, and even seeing full-bodied apparitions while staying in room 218. It is believed that the room is haunted by the ghost of Michael, who was a builder for the hotel that fell off the roof to his death back in 1885 and landed right in front of where room 218 sits. Others claim they've seen a middle-aged man with a white mustache sitting at the bar who vanishes out of sight. And in 1987, a guest said they saw a nurse pushing a gurney down the hallway in the middle of the night. But maybe most terrifying of all is room 202, where allegedly someone managed to photograph a ghost and prove its existence. Coming in at number 2, the Peel Mansion. Back in 1875, this mansion was built by a man named Samuel Peel. He was a US congressman and he lived in the home with his daughter Minnie. Both Peel and Minnie are said to haunt the house today, roaming the halls dressed in white, and often Minnie will play the piano if no one is in the room. But despite being the people the mansion is named after, they might not be the creepiest ghosts to haunt its halls. After the Peel family sold the mansion, a couple named Mr. and Mrs. English moved in with their family. One of their daughters, Marjorie, however, became very ill, and after discovering that she'd suffered from a burst appendix, a surgeon informed the family that she was not going to make it. After 10 days, Marjorie died and they covered her body in a sheet. But creepily, only a few hours after being pronounced dead, someone saw the sheet move. Marjorie was alive and went on to live for many more healthy years. But this troubled some of the staff on the farm, who believed that her spirit hadn't gotten back into her body and was somehow trapped under that sheet that others had seen moving. Years went by and Marjorie went back to her childhood home only to find that the room where people thought she had died was closed off. When she asked why, she was told it was haunted by a little girl. But the question was, is it Minnie or somehow the lost spirit from Marjorie's almost death? And last up in our number 1 spot, Highway 365. The legend began back in 1973 when a man picked up a girl on a bridge in the night. She was covered in bruises and cuts and looked very scared. She told the man that she had been in a car accident and asked if he could drive her home. The man complied, and when they got to the house she said was hers, she suddenly vanished from his car. Too stunned to realize what he'd just witnessed, the man went up to the door of the house anyway. The door was answered by the girl's father, who said that she had just died on that very bridge last month. But he wasn't the only one to see the girl in white, as she became known. The next year, a different man picked up a young woman on a bridge and drove her home. When they arrived, she asked if he could knock on the door since the house was dark, but when the door opened, the girl was gone, and the mother explained that her daughter had died 1 year earlier that same night. Finally, another year went by, and another man picked up the same girl dressed in white near a bridge in the rain. He offered her his coat to keep her warm, and when they got to her house, she vanished along with his coat. After talking with the dead girl's parent, who said she visits every year on the anniversary of her death, he went to visit the girl's headstone only to find his missing coat draped across it.